Hello, everybody, and good evening. My name's Don Arleth, and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. A new international organization was born in Davos today, the Board of Peace, chaired by U.S. President Donald Trump. This is Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with the U.S. President, and European leaders are meeting for an emergency summit in Brussels. We've got three correspondents in the field tonight. We have Oz Chatterjee in Kyiv, we've got Kazimierz Wyszak in Davos, and of course, Alex Cadier in the Belgian capital, Brussels. We start off, gentlemen, we will get to you in just a moment, but we start off with U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who met in Davos today in their first face-to-face this year. Afterwards, Zelensky expressed his frustration with European leaders, saying, quote, "Just last year, here in Davos, I ended my speech by saying Europe needs to know how to defend itself. A year has passed and nothing has changed. I'm forced to say the same words again." Now let's go live to our correspondent in Kyiv, Oz Chatterjee. Good evening, Oz. Now we hear the meeting with Trump went well, and on January 23rd, there'll be negotiations between the United States, Russia, and Ukraine. So could a peace agreement be near?
Well, both sides, the U.S. side and the Ukrainian side, said that meeting went well, but Zelensky traveled to Davos hoping to sign a document with the United States that would guarantee post-war reconstruction for Ukraine from the United States. That document was not signed. And as you said, the bit that you read out of what Zelensky said, it did show frustration. Zelensky's been striking a very diplomatic tone over the last few weeks, but this time he did sound quite frustrated in that speech in Davos. Now, he did mention the talks with Donald Trump and those negotiations in that. Here's what the Ukrainian president had to say.
Today we met with President Trump, and our teams are working almost every day. It's not simple. The documents aimed at ending this war are nearly ready.
So Zelensky there saying it's not simple. Donald Trump believes that a deal is close. Steve Witkoff also seems to believe that a deal is close, and the only issue remaining is that of territory. However, that issue of territory is still a fundamentally irreconcilable position between Russia and Ukraine. The Russians want Ukraine to give up Donetsk and Luhansk regions, and the Ukrainians don't want to, and the Ukrainian public don't want the Ukrainians to do that, even with security guarantees. Security guarantees President Zelensky says he discussed with Trump, again, saying that there can be no credible security guarantees for a post-war deal without the US's involvement. So it's very clear that Zelensky sees being diplomatic with Trump and keeping Trump on side as being important to reaching some kind of settlement, but certainly frustrations coming across in his speech in Davos. He also made calls for European unity. Here's what he had to say about that.
We should not accept that Europe is just a salad of small and middle powers seasoned with enemies of Europe. When united, we are truly invincible. And Europe can and must be a global force.
Now, President Zelensky also announced that there will be a new set of trilateral talks taking place in the UAE between the US, Ukraine, and Russia. This is the first time in a while that this has happened. Haven't heard a confirmation of that from the Russians yet, but that is expected to take place in the UAE tomorrow and on Saturday. So it remains to be seen how that's going to play out. But certainly very complicated negotiations still to come, even though Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff sound confident about it. The Ukrainian side certainly urging caution. Zelensky saying, though, that the documents were ready to sign. However, there are still massive issues plaguing these discussions, these negotiations, if they are to ever see the light of day.
Certainly, we can understand the frustration of President Zelensky because this war is just about to enter the fifth year, actually, at the end of February. Oz Chatterjee, thanks for that report. Donald Trump officially announced the founding of his international organization, the Board of Peace, with 60 countries invited to join. It's a pay-to-play organization with a price tag of $1 billion for a permanent seat. Now let's go to Davos and our correspondent Kazimierz Wisiak, who is live. Good evening, Kazimierz. So can you give us a rundown on the establishment of this new Board of Peace? How did this all play out in Davos?
Good evening, Don. We have witnessed history here in Davos at the World Economic Forum as US President Donald Trump signed into existence a new international organization, the Board of Peace, with some 20 other world leaders on stage with him. And he's already boasting that this is going to be a major breakthrough when it comes for peace in the world.
It is the chance to be one of the most consequential bodies ever created. And it's my enormous honor to serve as its chairman. I was very honored when they asked me to do it. We had an idea to do it, and then they came. They said, "You be the chairman." And but I take it very seriously.
However, while President Trump says that this is possibly one of the most consequential moments for world peace, there are still plenty of questions surrounding these organizations. It is quite controversial, as first of all, apart from the $1 billion fee that countries would have to pay for a 3-year membership, there is also the question of overlapping competencies with another international organization. Perhaps you've heard of it, the United Nations, which is supposed to be taking care of global peace. Now, we know, of course, that the UN wasn't really successful with ending, for example, the war in Ukraine, which has been going on for the past 4 years. However, still, as I've heard, for example, from the president of the UN General Assembly here at Davos earlier this week, there is one big advantage to the United Nations, the fact that it has big and small countries, almost all countries in the world being part of this organization. However, Donald Trump says that he would like for the Board of Peace to cooperate with the United Nations.
Tremendous potential with the United Nations, and I think the combination of the Board of Peace with the kind of people we have here, coupled with the United Nations, can be something very, very unique for the world. It's for the world. This isn't United States. This is for the world.
Now, how exactly this cooperation would look is rather unclear. I mean, there is a mandate in the United Nations to create a Board of Peace to solve the conflict in Gaza, and this Board of Peace will do that first, will focus on Gaza. However, it is meant to, generally speaking, globally handle different conflicts. But that's not the end of controversies. I mean, let's take a look at who exactly is joining this organization. The people who signed with President Trump on stage here in Davos from about 20 nations. We have leaders from across various continents, but if you look closely, you'll see that there is only a handful of European leaders who signed this agreement on the Board of Peace. We have the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, for example, a staunch Trump ally, but also the President of Kosovo. You could argue that Turkey is a European country, so Turkey is there as well. And, well, we also have Bulgaria, so only 2 EU members. That's not that many, and also there are questions about people who Trump invited, because, for example, he invited Russian President Vladimir Putin and Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko, making European allies question the very idea of joining such an organization. Now, there are some leaders who expressed eagerness to join this organization, but haven't signed it yet. One such leader is Polish President Karol Nawrocki, who was at the inauguration but wasn't on stage and didn't sign the agreement just yet. He also got some praise from President Donald Trump.
Thanks as well to President Karol Nawrocki of Poland, who's a fantastic man. He just won a very big election. I'm very proud of him.
I have expressed interest in the Board of Peace. Being invited to bodies that decide on the Middle East and the war between Israel and Palestine means prestige for Poland. It shows that Polish troops, diplomacy, government and the entire Polish nation are respected. Therefore, even though I did not put my name on it, I took part in the inauguration.
So the Polish president would need the agreement from the Polish government. And honestly, Poland serves as quite a good example for many other nations in Europe, many other European countries, which are still assessing whether they should join this organization. I mean, they have all the concerns I've mentioned before, but also no one wants to be left out.
All right, Kazimierz Wysiak reporting there from Davos, rightly pointing out that we're going to be very busy with this over the next weeks and months. Thank you for that, Kazi. Now, after Donald Trump threatened tariffs on European countries that supported Denmark in a dispute over Greenland, an emergency EU leaders summit in Brussels was called. Now that Trump has walked back his tariff threats and ruled out taking Greenland by force, Europeans went ahead with the meeting anyway and to handle other urgent issues. We are now joined by our correspondent in Brussels, Alex Cadier. Good evening, Alex. So, relief for European leaders on the Greenland front, but they still need to, well, they still decided to meet. What are they talking about exactly there in Brussels tonight?
Well, good evening, Don. The message we heard from Emmanuel Macron, the French president, on his way in here to the European Councils is that this meeting is to show European unity, to show solidarity, support for Denmark, support for Denmark's sovereignty, and to show that when Europe is united and is strong and it responds quickly, order and calm are restored. That's quite a rosy picture painted by the French president, but essentially this discussion is moving on from what could have been a crisis response. What do we do? How do we respond? Do we have to counter with tariffs of our own? How do we manage the communications? How are we united in our communications in Europe against Donald Trump? All of that has gone away, but rather it is about planning. What do we do if this happens again? Because clearly the consciousness, the awareness in the room is that this may very well happen again because of the unpredictability of the US president. We heard that from the EU's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas. So this has gone from crisis meeting to planning meeting. Of course, other things will be discussed in the sidelines. There may be some reactions to that very punchy speech we heard about from President Zelensky. But the focus, as I said, will be on that transatlantic relationship. We heard the value of that relationship, but also the need for managing it from the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk.
We built the EU for cohesion not to be the essence of politics. And for me, it's absolutely clear. As a Polish Prime Minister, I will be always very, dedicated to transatlantic relations. And for us, the United States are absolutely the most important partner when it comes to our security, etc. And we always accepted leadership of the United States. This is why it is so important for all of us, also for our partners in Washington, to understand the difference between domination and leadership. Leadership is okay.
So clearly they're the Polish position, wanting to continue working. The Prime Minister also called the US the most important security partner for Poland. But there is an unpredictability to Donald Trump, as I said. And this meeting, amongst other things, will be about making sure Europe puts forward a united front, despite some divisions behind the scenes. So clearly European leaders feel that it is crisis averted for now. It may come back. They want to be ready. Don?
All right, Alex Cadier reporting there from Brussels. Of course, been a really tumultuous week with this whole development there in Greenland. Thank you to you. Oz Chatterjee reporting from Kyiv. Of course, Kazimierz Wysiak at the Davos World Economic Forum, and Alex Cadier in Brussels. Thank you, gentlemen, for those reports. Now, Donald Trump and Mark Rutte have seemingly come to an understanding on Greenland, creating a framework for collective deterrence in the region. Military committee chiefs discussed how this impacts strategic planning going forward. Our defense correspondent Zuzana Jurek reports from NATO headquarters in Brussels.
Is the quarrel over Greenland finally over? Well, that appears to be the case for now, as the US President Donald Trump and the Secretary General Mark Rutte have agreed on a framework agreement to bolster collective defense and deterrence in the Arctic as it aligns with US's strategic priorities. Now, speaking here at Brussels at NATO HQ during the Military Committee Chiefs of Staff meeting, the Supreme Allied Commander for Europe, Alexis Grynkewicz, highlighted that although these decisions are very fresh and so the NATO alliance has not yet been able to address those in their strategic planning, it is willing and able to do so when the political decisions have been ratified.
I guess I would characterize our session this week as entirely focused on what military leaders are supposed to be focused on, which is ensuring the defense and deterrence of the Euro-Atlantic area. And we're united in that. We remain strong in that. We, of course, are aware of the political discussions that are going on, but there was never a military dimension to those discussions that made its way down to us. So we remain strong, we remain united, and we remain ready.
But as underlined by other NATO officials, including Admiral Cavo Dragoni, the chair of the military committee, the NATO alliance has been readying for bolstering defense in the region anyway, as it aligns with a more holistic approach to the alliance's defense and deterrence.
We discussed security on a 360 degrees perspective across all domains in Europe, on the southern flank, across the North Atlantic. We also discussed the Arctic, of course, a region of strategic relevance for NATO, where we have military exercises and training activities already pre-planned for the months to come.
For now, however, experts insist that the main crisis may be over, as per the fact that Donald Trump, the US president, has gotten what he set out to achieve. This is the sentiment that has been expressed by, amongst others, Stuart Dowell, TVP World's political editor.
America will have the right to permanently block any other nation, i.e. Russia and China, from laying down any infrastructure, from having any kind of licenses to mine for anything. And, you know, that's quite a big thing. And also Trump describes this as a forever deal because it'll just be forever. But you're right, that they're kind of getting what they've already got.
Now, we know that in the recent past, Donald Trump has oscillated back and forth between his commitments to NATO and lack thereof. So it remains to be seen just how durable these decisions taken at Davos will appear to be. From Brussels for TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
With energy infrastructure under constant attack and left in tatters, Ukraine urgently needs generators. Over 1.3 million euros was raised privately in the Warmth from Poland for Kyiv initiative. Now the Polish government is stepping in, donating 400 generators from strategic reserves. With the country braving sub-zero temperatures, you'll see why this type of assistance is so badly needed. Anastasia Yanchenko reports.
We received this video from Kyiv. Children are training for a gymnastic competition in a hall where temperatures are around 5 degrees Celsius. It is a stark reflection of the situation across the capital. Around 3,000 households remain without electricity, which forced many residents to seek warmth at so-called points of invisibility.
It's impossible to live like this. When it's freezing outside and you come home to an apartment where the temperature is only 5 degrees, it's inhumane.
Ukraine's neighbor and ally has stepped in to help Kyiv residents endure the harshest winter of the war so far. The charge of affairs of the Polish embassy in Kyiv, Piotr Lukashevich, announced that
more than 400 generators of various types from the Polish government reserves are on their way to warm you. Poland is helping.
Meanwhile, more than 40,000 Poles have donated to the Warmth from Poland to Kyiv campaign, raising over 1.3 million euros. Organizers say the funds will allow additional generators to be delivered beyond Kyiv, exceeding initial plans.
These are tens of thousands of Poles who are already engaged in these campaigns, and we are very thankful for them. And because of it, we are thinking about the other cities also.
At the same time, alongside ordinary Poles, Polish influencers are joining the initiative.
When I see these people freezing, I even feel bad that I am warmer. I would gladly give this warmth away as soon as possible. That's why we act the way we do.
Ukraine's foreign minister expressed his gratitude to the Polish people, calling them leaders in supporting Ukraine.
On my way home through Warsaw, I couldn't hold back from thanking every Polish family, every person with an open heart, and the entire Polish society. Ukraine is going through a very harsh winter, and you are standing with us in these very difficult circumstances.
Russia has escalated its energy attacks with no sign of stopping, seemingly to lower Ukrainians' morale, which is why Polish NGOs say this support is so important.
They're defending Europe too. They shouldn't be left alone. It's a question of being a human beings.
Anastasia Yanchenko, TVP World.
If leverage were measured in dollars, Europe has plenty. The continent holds trillions in U.S. bonds and assets, potentially influencing President Trump's retreat from some tariff threats. But America's vast internal market and the dollar's reserve status limit just how far this leverage can go. Maciej Wolowski reports.
Europe may have a valuable tool in its arsenal against Donald Trump's economic threats, the over $12 trillion in U.S. financial assets owned by European investors. When singling out treasuries or U.S. government bonds, European NATO member states own a combined $2.8 trillion. In total, a record $9.3 trillion in U.S. treasuries is owned by foreigners led by Japan and the United Kingdom. China, the U.S.'s third largest international creditor, has been unwinding its share, which fell in November to its lowest since September 2008. This could give Europe and other countries some leverage against U.S. President Donald Trump.
He is assuming that the U.S. economy is completely impervious, which is clearly wrong. The US depends on the kindness of strangers and massive foreign capital flows into the United States.
That dependence may have convinced the U.S. president to walk back some of his prior threats, including a new round of tariffs on European countries over Greenland.
And the United States cannot afford to upset everybody around the world all the time.
But some analysts are skeptical, arguing that the U.S. Treasury market is simply too big for even a coordinated global sell-off to make an impact.
If we all decided, so all the central banks, to sell everything that we have, we would probably give a dent on the American bond market.
To be sure, the U.S. holds significant financial advantages, the biggest of which may be the global reserve currency status of the U.S. dollar.
It gives you a different status than any other currency in the world.
Despite recent efforts toward de-dollarization by countries including China and Russia, the vast majority of financial transactions and trade in the world still takes place in U.S. dollars.
We might be buying gold, but we're going to be paying it in U.S. dollars. We might be buying oil from a different country than the United States, but we're going to be paying in a price that is accounted for in U.S. dollars.
And America's credit rating, the perceived creditworthiness of the U.S. government assigned by rating agencies like Fitch and Moody's, remains stellar. Europe's position as a creditor for the U.S. government may give it some leverage against the Trump administration, though the latter is a financial force to be reckoned with. Maciej Wilowski for TVP World.
Donald Trump unveiled his newly formed Board of Peace today at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Reactions have been mixed, from fanfare to caution and even ridicule. But fears that the new organization was an attempt to replace the United Nations may have been extinguished by Donald Trump himself, saying that they would work alongside the United Nations. Now, the big question is, what role will the Board of Peace take in global affairs, and how effective will it be? To discuss, I'm now joined by former Defense Minister of Slovakia, Martin Sklenar. Hello, Martin. Great to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Good evening, and it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yes. Now, it seems that Central and Eastern Europe might be more eager to join than those who have already refused, like France, the UK, and Germany. Hungary has already joined. Warsaw is going through the motions, the process of due diligence and ratification. How do you see this new Board of Peace in Europe? Could this cause divisions in the EU?
It certainly can be a representation of the different approaches that countries take when it comes to the United States and its president Donald Trump, because also the Board of Peace is something that very much goes in the vein of President Trump's way of doing business. It's not completely clear what it is and what it stands for and what will be its objectives. And also the setup of the organization or the initiative, and then also the membership, seem to raise questions and put countries in front of difficult decisions that they have to make based on their values and their usual approaches to international affairs, foreign affairs. So it's certainly something that can add to manifest the differences in countries when it comes to relationship with the United States, and also to their intensifying the internal political experience or internal political objectives that some of the representatives have in those countries.
Well, since here in Central and Eastern Europe, this region is very dependent on the United States as an ally for security, would you say that excuse me, I can't see quite. Would you say that this is going to be a major difference between what happens in this part of Europe as compared to what happens, say, in other parts of Europe?
Yes, certainly. Central and Eastern Europe is a little bit more differentiated than the rest of Europe, so to call it, or even the rest of the world. What we see, the countries that actually already made the decision to be part of the Board of Peace are certainly countries who do not shy away from making pragmatic decisions based on their interests, in having hopefully something to put into the basket of issues that they can develop with the United States. I mean, they care less about what it's going to be. They care more about that it's going to be led by the United States and chaired by Donald Trump for the foreseeable time, or maybe even forever. So this is the kind of incentives that these countries have in their decision making. Other countries make their decisions based on trying to pursue value-based principles and policy decisions, which makes it a little bit more difficult, or a lot more difficult for them to accept an invitation to be part on the board, simply because they're even coming from the United States, which is already not really at the level of reliability that we are used to, and there are other countries joining this initiative and the organization, which for some countries are certainly showstoppers in whatever decision that they would need to make. For example, the participation of Belarus or other countries in this is especially for Ukraine, but also for other European countries, something that they cannot really look past. And in the Central and Eastern European reality, you have some of the differences between countries where you will see and you can expect how these countries will react, either based, as I say, on their values or on the pragmatic approach towards a relationship with the U.S. and what can they actually invest into the relationship in terms of political capital, because it will not be easy to be on this board for Central European countries.
Right. I imagine that Vladimir Putin being on this board and Lukashenko, as you mentioned, that for some countries it would be an absolute non-starter. How about the organization as such? It seems that Donald Trump thinks that this is a way to cut through the red tape of other international organizations, and we can take the United Nations, for instance, and say that it's diplomacy that doesn't necessarily bring good concrete results. The way that we're looking at this right now, with 60 countries invited, some will join, some will not, is this a way to cut through some of that diplomatic red tape that we see in international relations?
Well, that's certainly not clear, I mean, to say the least. And even if you have all the countries, 60 countries joining, that would be tremendous, but that's not expected. It's not going to be an overwhelming majority, so it's not going to be creating the critical mass of solving some of the, or as it is portrayed now, solving some of the crises in the world. Because the mandate has grown so much now compared to what the UN has actually adopted in November to begin with. I mean, the board was established as part of a decision by the UN, but very much related to Gaza. And now, as it is growing, it is not clear how the countries that are actually getting on the board can contribute towards solving those issues. If you take Ukraine, I mean, if you have a board of peace. Where you have the US, Russia, but not Ukraine or most of the European countries. I mean, it's certainly not the platform that will be able to deliver either a solution or even progress in a possible negotiation. So it remains very questionable how it will operate. What it looks like is that the motivation of many of the countries who are joining is be there for the 3 years that you can get the membership for free. You don't have to pay the $1 billion as a membership fee. And then after the 3 years, when there is no clarity yet on whether Donald Trump will still be in office, then they can make a decision about whether they will remain on the board or they will basically just withdraw from the membership because it will have no practical and pragmatic impact for them.
Right, which seems like a good offer. It's like a free trial. You can go ahead and try the service for a little while, and if you're not happy with it, well, I guess you can cancel your subscription. Martin Sklenar, former...
The idea is that the service should deliver at least some substance, and we will have to see whether that will be the case for this.
Certainly. Well, Martin Sklenar, former defense minister of Slovakia, thank you so much for joining us on World News Tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.